Hi guys, this is On Screen, Off Screen. Thank you guys so much for listening and or watching. Thank you anybody who's given comments or likes or reviews. Super appreciate it. Conlon, what is your topic for this episode?
Okay, my first one is Despicable Me 4. Um, I watched this because I like Despicable Me 1 and 2. I think they're both enjoyable movies, not my favorite animated movies of all time, but enjoyable. I like them. 3 was a step down for me. Um, but I liked 2 of the movies, give a fourth one a shot. This one has a very similar formula. Like you feel like you're just watching. It's a Despicable Me movie. If you like the first,
Sorry, which two did you like?
the first two.
Okay, go ahead.
First two. Um, if you like the first two Despicable Me movies, you will probably have an enjoyable time with this one. Is this a movie I would watch again? No. Am I glad that I watched it once? Yeah. It wasn't disappointing to me like Kung Fu Panda 4 was disappointing to me. This one was just like I expected Despicable Me. I got Despicable Me. Not a bad time. Do you like these movies? Do you like Despicable Me at all?
No.
No, none of them.
I
Not even
had
the
a
first one.
really good time with the first one once, but
Okay.
found it utterly unwatchable the second time I watched it, and I found Despicable Me 2 utterly disappointing and pretty terrible.
Okay.
I
Why
never
did you?
wasted time with Minions or any of the other shows since.
The Minion movies are terrible, like legitimately awful. Uh, 3 is not good, but I wouldn't say it's terrible. The Minion movies are terrible. Why didn't you like number 2? Do you know?
I don't remember off the top of my head. Um,
Okay.
I don't even remember what happens in it.
Despicable Me 2 is he meets the girl who he's going to get married to, and then there's the bad guy with the happy song, and they go on the boat and they take down the bad guys. You remember any of this stuff at all?
No.
Okay,
So my
so
rating
utterly
for number
unrememberable
2
for you.
is forgettable.
Okay,
And my review for the first one is it was really enjoyable once, but the second time none of the jokes landed anymore. It was old, been there, done that.
this
Don't need
didn't
to
work
watch
for you.
it anymore. I'm not against people liking the show. Like I said, I really enjoyed it once.
Yeah,
And hey, if that works for you, great. I'm really surprised that the fourth one is on there for you because it doesn't seem like your kind of show.
it's really not. I watched the first one with some cousins, little kids when it came out. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have even watched the first one. But I enjoyed watching them watch it, and I enjoyed the movie enough that it found a fondness in my heart. And the second one, I also kind of a similar situation. The third one was I also watched with kids, but the movie is not very good. Like there's not some funny parts that I can really enjoy. It was just the same old without any of the cleverness that I think the first two have. So you're left with something that feels kind of dull and lifeless. This one had some of the cleverness of the first two movies and made it a more enjoyable experience for me than the third one was. Do I think any of these movies are truly great? No, but I do enjoy the first two quite a bit. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, it does.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, guys, if you've watched Despicable Me 4, I looked at the IMDb listings and people don't really like this movie like at all. As I guess as a 7.3. That's number 2. One second. Number 2 has a 7.3.
Rotten Tomatoes is 56%.
Yeah.
Letterbox is 2.7 out of 5, and IMDb is 6.2 out of 10.
Yeah, people, it's not a very highly rated movie. I would give it a little bit higher than that, 6.6, 6.7. I enjoyed watching it once. And if you like the series, I think it would be easier to enjoy this one, even though you are seeing a lot of the same things you've seen before.
Well, I'm glad that you're glad you watched it.
Me too. Me too. All right, man. What's your next one?
Dungeons and Daddies.
Yes.
I've listened to one episode and only one episode. Uh, because I've been listening to books and I've gotten to the point where they're at the library. So I'm to the point where you found enjoyable. So
Yes.
far, it's pretty good. I also listened to, so I subscribed to their Patreon, so I basically listen to twice as much as you do, as I
Okay.
listen to their talking dads or whatever they call it. And I have this to say I was right about the Asterion episode. I was so right.
What do you mean?
They were talking about having Neil on the show,
Yeah.
and Beth was talking about how she didn't get it because she doesn't play games. But then she saw him and they made eye contact, and she quote unquote understood everything about him.
Really?
Yeah. So I was dead right about that episode. She was just flirting with him the whole time. It was a garbage edge episode. I will die on this hill.
I loved that episode. I thought it was hilarious. But it sounds like she was just flirting with him. I can't believe she doesn't play games. She's on one of the biggest D&D podcasts in the world and she doesn't play games? That's
She's
crazy to me.
she never played D&D before this show.
Yeah, I know. But I think she'd
She's
get into some more of the nerdy stuff because she is literally like her job and she's surrounded by absolutely nerdy stuff all the time.
her job is actress and she's a poet on the side and did this because there was nothing to do during COVID.
This has to be her main job now. She
It is
makes
now.
so much money. Yeah. So like now she is surrounded by nerdy stuff constantly.
It's just not her thing. She does
Okay.
poetry. She plays D&D once a week.
Have you ever read her poetry or anything?
I have, yeah.
Oh, is it good?
No,
Oh. Do you like poetry at all?
some poetry. I
Okay.
do have a favorite poem. I do have a favorite poet. Um, hers is just not my stuff. She's
Okay.
very curse word inclusive
Oh,
and very surface level of writing poetry about how she slept with this guy. And I mean that
okay.
literally about how she slept with that guy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Some
That
of her
doesn't sound
stuff
great.
is not that literal, but she's not the worst in the world. I didn't
Hmm.
listen to her or read it and go, well, this is just crap. But was it as impactful to me personally as I like poetry to be? Also, no. So,
Okay. I'll try
yeah,
reading some of her stuff and see what I think. Because I don't know. That doesn't sound that great, but I'd be curious.
give it a shot. Why not?
Be curious.
It's free on
I'm
me.
interested in what you think about the next episode because like I said, no, I love the next episode. I haven't caught up either. They released one a day or two ago. I'll get to
Yeah,
it at some point.
I will too. I found a new way to get through my books and stuff that I find very enjoyable. So,
How?
uh, I'll just go on to my next topic because that kind of leads into it.
Okay, go ahead.
So my next topic is Primal Hunter Book 2.
Yeah.
I finished it. So last time I reported on the first like 3/4 of the book,
Mhm.
a little bit more than that. Finished it, and the ending of this book is a lot better than the beginning.
Okay, good. Good.
It's a lot better than it. They're introducing a lot of characters that I'm very excited about. Carmen specifically.
She's very cool.
I'm hoping that she becomes an ally and not an enemy. Um, Cons for this series right now. Here's where I'm sitting.
Mhm.
What I'm worried about.
Yeah.
He's very one-dimensional about his enemies, and I'm kind of already getting tired of it.
Okay. What do you mean?
All of his enemies are rapists or sociopaths.
Um,
He is an author who is like, insert easy reason to hate character here.
your turn. Ye that is a little bit of a con for the series. I'll be completely honest. I think some of the villains become more complex, but there's always a very easy reason to hate the person. Besides, have you run into Yip of Yore yet? I think he's in book 3. We'll talk about it at all.
It sounds vaguely familiar. If he did
Okay,
pop up, it's at the end.
Yip of Yore ends up being the main baddie for the Viper for a little while.
Okay.
Um, and he is an interesting, much more complex character. But a lot of Jake's villains are. This is a very easy reason why I hate you, and you are going to die. And it is a little bit of a problem.
Well, like, I mean, let's be honest. I've now finished book 3.
Yeah,
I've run into 4 enemies for Jake, maybe 3.
you've run into um like
Richard.
what are you counting as big enemies?
So Richard is the first one he runs into,
Yes,
and he's
William.
controlling guy. William is a sociopath.
Mm-hmm.
There's the guy who invades his territory and his daughter, and he's a rapist, and she's a
And he
sociopath.
complete and utter horrible people that just need to
Yeah,
be murdered.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
I will.
we've been introduced to, we haven't run into this character, but at the end of book 2, he does like 6 characters where he's establishing the other primordial characters or whatever the
Yeah,
title is that they're given. Carmen is one of them. Why I'm so excited for her.
she's
Um,
cool.
Slave girl, but we also have another rapist.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, I know 12 characters,
Mm-hmm.
and 3 of them, a quarter of them, are rapists. So this author is clearly not going
Very
very
against
far
rapists.
off this path of insert easy reason to make people hate character here.
William gets much more complicated and very interesting. Like this is a little bit of a spoiler, but the system grants what you wish the most, and William wants to understand emotion. So he's a narcissist who doesn't feel typical emotions, who is
Yeah,
starting
he's a
to feel typical
sociopath.
emotions. He's a sociopath. It's a very interesting character development. I really like where they go with William, and I'm excited what they do with him moving forward. So he gets a little bit more complex. There's a main baddie. His name's Al Khan. You'll run into him probably next book, maybe the book after that. Um, and he's a main baddie that is more complicated, but you also have a very easy reason why you hate him. But it's
Yeah.
a more complex, interesting reason why you hate him. Um, but there is always like this guy is obviously bad. It can't just be like, you know what, we're on opposite sides of the conflict and I want to win the conflict because I'm a hunter and I don't lose. So I'm going to smash this guy, even though he's not terrible. He's just on the opposite side. You don't get as much of that.
Yeah.
I,
So
yeah,
let me be super clear to listeners
yeah,
who are not listening to this book. Right now,
mhm,
it's just an inkling, right? Like, I'm not saying don't listen to this book because of this thing.
yeah.
I'm saying I can see that this might get to the point where it's out of hand and out of control. My other, like, con or concern in the same fashion
Mhm.
is he introduced so many characters. It could get kind of hard to follow if we have 6 main character or 6 POVs to follow
That is
all
not
of
a
the time.
con that I have any problems with. Like he does a good job with that. I don't think that's
You may
a
do that, but
problem.
I have ADHD, and so
That's true.
Jake and Jacob already has been a problem for me, and not knowing which POV we're actually talking about more than one time has already happened. Right? Like, it's really easy for my mind to be like, this is Hunter, this is Augur, this is Boxer. It is much harder for my mind to follow, this is Jake, this is Jacob, and this is Miranda. Or not
Okay.
Miranda, whatever her name is. Miranda's the slave. Another character I'm super excited about, but um, Carmen, right? So when he's talking about it and he's like, I'm a hunter, I'm like, okay, this is Jake. I can follow this. But when he's just using first names and he's like, and Jake said this and saw this, and I'm like, okay, who are we? Where are we at? What the crap's going on?
What's
I
going on?
can't follow this. Rewind. Okay, I've listened to this part 6 times already. Why do I blank on this sentence every time?
I don't think it'll be as bad. Jake and Jacob become more separated. So like you're dealing with Jacob because it's just focused on the Holy Church and everything around it is like this is the augur. It's very different,
Yeah,
and he's not mentioned nearly as much as you go throughout the series.
right. But I mean, if we keep getting more POVs to follow, I'm
Yeah.
concerned that we're just going to be not progressing through the grander
Okay.
story because we're too busy switching between points of views.
It gets to the point where you'll have Cameron every once in a while, who will pop up. You have Miranda every once in a while. You have the slave girl whose name
Miranda
I
is
can't
the
remember
slave
her name.
girl.
No, Miranda's the girl that shows up in the valley, and she's trying to protect um, the builder and his daughter, who they ran away from the beasts, and then she becomes the left hand assistant to Jacob. The slave girl is the elf girl, who has a different name. What is her name?
It starts with an M. I'm
It
very
starts with an
confident it
M.
starts with an M.
See, that maybe that's where confusion comes in. I don't know why I can't remember her name right now. Miranda is a different person.
Okay. See, I'm just terrible with names.
Yeah,
Terrible with names. I can follow titles just fine, but, but names, it's
but I would say like 80% of the books moving forward is just follows Jake, and other
okay.
characters happen to be with Jake.
Okay. I love the lizard god so far. I'm super
He's
interested.
awesome.
Um, he's already laying plans that are quote years down the road for Jake.
Mhm.
So I'm assuming we're gonna get some time jumps coming up because if we're doing this month at a time and the god is years down the line with plans for Jake, that's gonna be a very slow, like, are we getting 300 of these books kind of concern there. um I'm still loving it.
Okay,
End of
good.
book 2 was really great.
Nice.
I love, like I said, I love all the character introductions. I'm very curious about all of them. Carmen is the most interesting at this point in time to me, but I've listened to book 3 and like none of them have progressed except for a little bit
Jake.
about the slave girl.
And yeah, Miranda goes up a little bit and the slave girl goes up a little
Yeah,
bit.
but
But
she wasn't one of those
yeah,
primordial introduced books at the end of book 2.
yeah.
So, let's hit your next couple of topics and then we'll go into our shared topics.
Okay, I have got two that should be fairly short. We need to talk about Kevin. I was super interested when someone told me about this book. The concept is a mother who has to deal with her son who was a school shooter, and the feelings that she has to deal with, the ostracization of the community that she's part of. It sounds super interesting. Um, and the author dealt with some tragedy in their life, so they came from a place where they had a little bit more understanding. I didn't like the way this book was written at all. It was it felt like there were too many details sometimes and there weren't enough details other times. The talk about the emotion wasn't very coherent. I felt like I was going crazy reading the book. It felt hard to follow. I'm usually not terrible at following where books and stories are going, but this one I kind of had trouble wrapping my mind around what the main character, the mother, was actually thinking and feeling. And it became so much, I decided not to finish this book. I usually push through and I get to the end of things. If the writing style didn't bug you about this, the concept and the possibility of how well it could be written and how well it could affect you, I think would be worth giving it a try. For me, it just didn't work. I didn't like it. I couldn't get into this book.
That's fair.
Um,
I would not read that book. I would never even pick up that book.
really, that doesn't interest you at all?
I don't watch the news because it's too depressing.
Okay, this book's depressing.
Yeah. And
Absolutely
I'm not
depressing.
opposed to like going into depressing topics. I'm opposed to going into topics that are going to be nothing but depressing all of the time.
Yeah, and that's what this book is. 100%.
Yeah. And I can tell that
100%.
just by the synopsis. Like, I'm interested about the girl who played Sam in iCarly's book. I'm glad my mother died. That one's interesting to me.
Yeah.
But this book, we need to talk about, Kevin. That's like 13 reasons why on steroids kind of synopsis to me. So,
Kind of. It's
just in the
we
level that it's down all the time. It's just
yeah,
going to be a downer book all the time.
and I just didn't like it. I didn't like this book. I got 40-ish% of the way through and I just won't finish it. I'm done. The other book that I wanted to talk about, I loved. It's called The Motive, and it's a book that's just telling a parable. It's really short. I think the audio book is like 2.5 hours long, and it is a guy who's bought a bunch of businesses before who comes in and starts talking to this business owner who has a very interesting business, but it's not thriving. And the parable is literally talking about, why are you in leadership? Why are you being this person? Why are you making these choices? Did you become a leader because it was easier to be a leader? Or did you become a leader to be able to help the people underneath you to grow, progress, become something more? And it does it in this interesting parable way where it keeps asking questions over and over and over again. It's 2 hours. And if you're into business or leadership or anything like that at all, I think it's worth reading. It's not that much time. And I genuinely think you can just get something out of it. I really, really liked this book.
That's cool. Short and simple is always great. Uh,
Yeah.
my favorite
And
short and simple is And Then There Were None.
great. It's a great book.
Short and simple is great. And short and simple about leadership is always a great way to go to.
Yeah. Just, I feel like the point that people get into leadership so they can just kind of put their feet up is something that happens a lot of the time. And you get the chance to really change people's lives. Like I do leadership in the company that I work for, and I love when I see somebody progress in their life when it isn't even at work. Like somebody who I hired kind of took a chance on hiring them, whereas they were kind of stuck in their life. They were living paycheck to paycheck. They weren't really very happy. They would miss work because their anxiety was so high. And now they're like they're taking classes to try to program, and they're boxing again, and they're just doing some things to better their lives and live a little bit higher. And that's so cool. It just feels good, and it's cool to see somebody progress. And if you're in a leadership position, really, I think everyone's in a leadership position. If you're living a life, you have the chance to make people around you a little bit better. You don't think so? I think everyone has someone that looks up to them, and that puts you in a little bit of a leadership position. You have the chance to raise up a little bit higher. You are shaking your head so much. What do you think?
I think that you think that because you are kind of a natural leader inclined.
Okay.
So it's hard for you to be in the position where you look up but nobody looks up to you.
What do you mean?
Meaning, like, it's hard for you to understand that concept. Like, you yourself, you're in a position where you have leaders, you have people that you look up to, you have people
Yeah.
that you aspire to be. You
Yeah.
are also a leader. You have people that look up to you, that you train, that you work with in your company, in real life, in everyday life, all that kind of stuff. You also grew up in the LDS church where they kind of incentivize that a lot, where you go from being a deacon to being deacon's quorum president or first counselor or whatever, right? Like
Yeah,
pretty much
it's
all of
natural
us go
progression.
through that. You kind of just go through it where it kind of get into this flow of looking up, then being looked at, looking up, then being looked at, then looking up, then being looked up to, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but I don't think that that's always the case. I think that there are people who are absolutely just sheep in this world, and there are
You
a
don't
lot of them.
you don't think even sheep have somebody, like one person, a little sister, someone who looks up to them a little bit?
No.
Like you've talked about your brother being really good at everything.
Mhm.
Um, you don't think in some ways he looks up to his big brother in something?
Oh
I
yeah, he
just I
absolutely does.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
figure it's hard to think of somebody that really
he and
has
I have talked about.
nobody
Yeah,
that looks up to them even for a moment. Like you have a moment of leadership. Really, you think there's like literally nothing?
yeah. I think there are people out there in the world who
Ah,
don't get looked up to.
that's too bad. I
Well,
guess
I
there's
mean,
people who really don't want that too, probably.
yeah. I look at the homeless people,
That's true. That's true.
right? Nobody is looking at them for
No,
anything. Nobody's looking at up to them in any way.
but I guess there'd be a bottom of the homeless people, but I think there'd be a homeless hierarchy too. I don't know this. I'm speaking out of my butt, but I figure there would be a homeless leader of some kind, a leader of the homeless. But
Not
maybe I'm
really. No,
I'm
it's
crazy. I don't know.
it's very much eat or be eaten mentality, right? It's in the wild.
Yeah,
This is my corner. This is my territory. Get the frick out. And a lot of them are usually crazy too. So you have to understand they're not logical, regular human beings out there. There is alpha and beta, and there is right. There's not
sheep and
leading.
shepherd and wolf.
There's wolf and sheep. There's not shepherd. There's nobody leading. There is territory. There is belonging. There is ownership. But there, and
That's
again,
it.
I'm talking about a community that is 99% actually crazy,
Yeah, crazy, depressed, drug
right?
abused, all that kind
But
of
that
stuff.
is a community that nobody within the community looks up to anybody, and
Yeah,
nobody outside the community looks up to them for very logical reasons, for the same reason, even though a lot of them can be very nice people, can have a lot of exceptional
absolutely.
skills, right? But that is an entire community, right? Where you in Utah County probably don't encounter that community very often. So it's
No.
probably not the forefront of your mind. But that is a community of people that aren't looked up to
And I guess
and
part
don't
of the
look up
point
to.
of this book is like it's trying to make the point that leadership requires more of you, and maybe it literally brings this up in the book. Maybe that's not what you want to be, and if you don't want this responsibility, you don't want the leadership, that's also okay. You can choose to make that, which I like part of that book. It's just you're right. You're right. There are certain sects of people where they have nobody looking up to them. I think there's a
And what
lot of
about
people
like
that have more people looking up to them than they think.
sometimes, but there's also like depressed teenagers who are
Yeah,
isolating, right?
that's true.
Nobody's looking up to them because they're not making themselves seen.
They're hiding as much as they
They're
possibly
hiding.
can.
Yeah. So nobody's really looking up to them because nobody can see them. And that's sad and that's terrible. And those people should step out of their shell. Take it from somebody who didn't step out of your shell, step into the spotlight, put yourself out there. But that's another group of people that just
Are doing everything they
are
possibly can not to be any
not
kind
to
of
be
leader or stand out or be
have any
heard.
attention whatsoever.
But even when you were hiding like that, don't you think somebody looked up to you at moments? Like moments where you showed yourself or moments where you were
I mean, you can talk
something?
about, like, if you want to talk about my personal life,
Yeah.
I have been built up to be a leader my entire life,
Okay.
right? Like, every single job that I've been in, I've been promoted into leadership roles.
Yes.
Even my current company, which I didn't want, right? Like, I was the one who went straight from Deacon's Quorum to Deacon's Quorum president to Teacher's Quorum to Teacher's Quorum president to Priest Quorum to Priest Quorum first counselor, because I I kind of I got AJ to go to church multiple times. Right? Like, if you want to talk about me, I'm an extreme introvert who tried to isolate, but whose natural inclinations are very much in leadership styles.
Yeah.
Right. So, talking about
I
me
absolutely see that.
personally, about that isolated community, I am not a good representative for that community
Because you're like, I'm
because
trying to have
I'm
nobody
trying
pay attention
so
to me,
hard.
but I just can't do it.
I forget sometimes, and I do something, and it has an effect on people. I'm sorry. Um, but there are, like, again, I grew up LDS, so, like, I was also in that kind of flow of things where you kind of, like, didn't really have a choice most of the time,
Yeah, you just kind of
right?
get weirdly brainwashed is kind of the word I want to use, even though. So this is like
Indoctrinated.
a side topic.
Um,
Indoctrinated. Yes, I don't think brainwashing is always a bad thing. I think the military absolutely brainwashes people, but it makes better people. Brainwashing is not always bad. But when you're growing up in the church, you're getting brainwashed, and I don't necessarily think it's all bad. It just is what it is.
I don't want to get into that, but my point is, I also grew up with 6 siblings, right?
Yeah, it's a lot of siblings.
It's a lot of siblings, and that's a lot of people looking at all the different aspects, and it's a lot of people criticizing you for not doing things, and it's a lot of people criticizing you for doing things. So it's hard to not be seen in that environment. But I recognize not everybody has siblings. Not everybody has family reunions where you and your 200 cousins all go to the same place at the same time during the same week and go four-wheeling and all of those things. And some of them are older than you and don't pay attention to you. True, because they're too cool. But there's younger as well,
Yeah,
right? So, like, I acknowledge that I'm in this boat. And I acknowledge that the boat of single child without those familial connections, who can kind of more isolate, who can, let's say they were just in more into reading than me. Like, how am I supposed to isolate when I don't like individual sports and I'm too ADHD to read a book?
that makes it hard.
Makes it kind of hard, So
Yeah,
I
you can
played
watch How I
junior
Met Your
jazz
Mother
and
for
I
the
played
ninth time,
basketball,
but
and you know, so I can absolutely talk about my experience, but I can also stand up and say, like, I do believe that this group of people, while small, does exist where
does
people just
exist.
don't see them.
Hmm. That's a good point. That's a good
Right.
point. I
I I worked in a boys treatment home where a lot of these young men, 12 to 18, did have lives like that and probably would continue to have lives like that had they not come to my treatment center and got put into the position where they were kind of pushed into the spotlight.
That's where they had to do that.
Yeah.
But if they had the choice, they wouldn't have made that choice.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. I want people to be happy, and I obviously don't have all the answers, but I think that's kind of the point: to ask the questions, try to figure out who you want to be, and try to be the best you can for people around you. You know?
Yeah, for sure. But that's where the next point I disagree with you is, like, if you don't want to be a leader, you can just not be.
Yeah.
I think that's true to an extent, but I also think that there is a responsibility to leadership. And whether you want to be a leader or an example, if you're in a position where you are, you have to be responsible with that.
You just have to do it. 'Cause
You just have to
that
do
is
it.
a good point, because if you have people looking up to you, even if you don't want that to be the case, if you choose to do nothing, they'll look up to that and it will affect them, which
Yeah.
isn't all on you, but it does happen. I've been that person. It does happen.
Look at your nieces and nephews or those little kids you watch Despicable Me 4 with, right? Like,
Yeah.
they're going to look up to you because you're an adult.
Yeah.
And you can either take that opportunity to try and be a leader and show them and lead, or you can choose to not be.
Yeah.
It is a choice, but choosing not to be is the wrong choice. It's not
And
just like I can just choose not to be, and it's not my problem because they're not my kids.
you look up to older siblings. I'm the oldest in the family, and even there were times where I was just kind of a screw up, and that 100% affected my siblings. And
Mhm.
it's something that I think is natural, kind of unfortunately for when I was in high school, because I wasn't the person I wanted to be. Um,
Nobody is. So
yeah,
you're 100% right. It is natural. And you're right. When you're a sibling and you're growing up and your siblings are looking up to you, or looking down to you, like you're going to screw up, you're going to screw them up, right? Like as a parent,
yeah,
you're going to screw up, you're going to screw them up. I have always said it's not your job as a parent to not screw up your kids. It's your job to screw them up as minimally as possible because
possible.
you're going to screw them up,
And
right?
just do the best that you
Same for
can.
your siblings, right? Siblings are even less so because you yourself are young and stupid too. So you're going to screw them up even bigger.
You just do the best that you can. Keep moving forward.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, that's the motive. I'd recommend it to people. It's short, it's sweet. Give it a shot.
I'll be checking it out.
Sweet.
Thanks everybody for listening to this episode. Super appreciate all of you so much. Uh, Share, bring more people in. If we can get some more people, I'll talk Conlon into doing a live episode because I know that more than one of you, i.e., the two people who have been commenting, Angel Turtle and Lauren, they want to scream at us all the time because we don't know things like who that name of character is or who the name of actor is or whatever. But let's get big enough I can do a live episode and we can interact with you guys more.
That'd be awesome.
That'd be great.
See you guys.